Perfect. Welcome everyone to this afternoon's webinar. We appreciate you spending your time with us today. My name is Laura Hep-Kessel. I am here with you today for this webinar that's brought to you by University of Illinois Extension and Rural Partners, Illinois Rural Development Council. I actually work for the SIU School of Medicine as the Director of Telehealth, but in this role, I'm serving as the Chair of Rural Partners and appreciate our partnership with Extension to host these webinars. There are a few housekeeping details I'd like to share. Because we have so many on the line, please mute your mic and stop your video if you're not presenting. If you have questions or comments, please use the chat space. We'll be monitoring those, and at the end of the presentation, I will follow up with questions to our speakers. If you're having audio difficulty, post those questions in the chat space, and someone from Extension will provide technical assistance. This webinar will be recorded and will be available later on the local government education website. You will get an email if you did register for this webinar. You'll get an email with a link to the recording as well as the PowerPoint slides. If you didn't register for the webinar but had the information shared with you, please maybe put your email address in the chat box so that we make sure you get added to that list so that you'll get that email when the recording is available. So again, thank you to Extension for partnering with us, with Rural Partners, to offer this webinar. Today, we're going to hear about smart growth for rural communities. We have two speakers with us. Mim Evans is a senior research associate with the Center for Governmental Studies at Northern Illinois University, and Jolene Willis is the Dekalb County's Economic Development Coordinator. So thank you so much for being with us today and taking time to talk to us about your work. And I'm going to hand it to you, Mim.
Thank you, Laura. We get my screen up here. That look okay to everyone?
Looks very good.
Okay, we're ready to go. I'm with the Center for Governmental Studies at Northern Illinois University, and we are part of the university's outreach division. So our role is to provide technical assistance to communities and other levels of government throughout the state, particularly in the northern part of the state. What I want to share with you today is some of what we've learned in the many communities that we've worked in and some of the additional research that we've done. And then I'm going to be joined by Jolene Willis from Dekalb County, who we have worked very closely with, who will provide some in the trenches examples of what a county can do to promote rural development. So let's get started. Of course, now the slides aren't advancing. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. Don't know why we ran into that. We even had a little pre-test here and still ended up with a problem. Anyway, organizing today's presentation in terms of 4 questions. The first is, what kind of growth does the community want? The second is, how can we grow our population? The third, how can we grow our businesses? And the fourth, how can regionalism help us succeed? And I want to preface by saying that we're orienting this to rural communities. That is our focus in this particular presentation. I noticed many of you are from communities that are not rural or serve areas that are not necessarily rural. I think many of these points, with some modification, are equally applicable. So when we talk to folks in communities, and we do that an awful lot, this is one of the groups here on the screen, one of our community meetings, we tend to find that people have 4 responses when you ask them what kind of growth do they want. The first is, I don't want any change, my community's perfect just the way it is, and that's why I live here. So if that's your attitude, then I guess this isn't really for you. The next is, well, I really just want some more amenities in my community. I'd like downtown to look great. I'd like a grocery store. We don't have a grocery store, or whatever. Maybe a few more people would be okay if it enables us to do those things. But really, I just want the town better for me. The third response is, well, tourism growth would be great. Well, it would be nice to have visitors that would help support our local businesses. And the fourth is the strongest response. We really need new industry. We'd like to bring some major employers to our community. So what I would suggest, because these questions can be answered in such different ways, is that every community start by figuring out exactly what the community does want. Much better to find that out at the beginning than when you have a proposal before your council or it's in the newspaper or whatever, and then you find that a major group doesn't like it. We always start by assembling a profile of the community and the surrounding area. The zip code generally can fill in for the surrounding area. Do a survey of residents and business owners and hold one or more community meetings. Doesn't have to be anything complicated. That's enough to begin to get you an idea of how the community feels about growing. That being said, let's talk about what Lincoln said. Lincoln said, supposedly, I will get ready and someday my chance will come. And there couldn't be anything more true than that when you're talking about growing a community. You have to be prepared. So when that opportunity arrives, you can really jump on it. So what do you need to be prepared? The first is a comprehensive plan. We find that many rural communities have a zoning map, but they don't really have a comprehensive plan. And if your zoning ordinance ought to be based on a comprehensive plan, that's where your community really decides the physical representation of what they want their community to be. We're working on a new model for comprehensive planning because it's expensive. It can be very expensive. And many of you probably heard over $100,000 for a comprehensive plan. There needs to be a comprehensive plan process that's affordable for smaller communities and that takes into account what they can and can't do and what their staffing levels are and all of that. So we're working towards that. And I just would encourage you to think about comprehensive planning and keeping those plans up to date. The next, after you've got that, is some marketing materials. If somebody asks about your community, you sure want to have something to hand them or something to send them a link to, something that looks great, that looks professional. The third thing, and I think this is perhaps the most important, make sure you develop leaders. Things happen in communities because there's leadership more than anything else. It could be the greatest opportunity. If there's not leadership, it's not going to be realized. Those could be elected folks, but often they're not elected folks. And you've got to ask. You got to ask and cultivate. And the next thing is to foster alliances. Again, when those opportunities come, you don't want to be going it alone. Whatever overlapping jurisdictions you want them to be on board as well. Whatever help you can get at other levels of government, you want that all lined up. Have all of these pieces in place. And then when that opportunity comes, as Lincoln said, you'll be ready. So let's talk about the second question. How can we grow our population? There's three ways population can grow. The first is natural increase, more births than deaths. In rural communities, that can be tough because rural communities are aging fast. And it's tough to hang on to the younger folks who might be the ones who would generate that natural increase. If you want to get increase in young folks, let's move on to the other two options for how to grow your community. Immigration. Now, immigration is one that you don't often have a lot of control over because it's federal policies that are generally going to determine how much immigration there is. But if immigration is an option, there are many examples within Illinois of communities that have successfully grown their population, increased the enrollment in their schools, had new businesses start in their downtowns, all as a result of immigrants joining their community. So that's the second way. And the third way is relocation. You've all probably heard Illinois does not do well on relocation in terms of people from out of state coming here. As a matter of fact, we have a net out migration here, as shown by the last census. But that doesn't mean people can't relocate within the state. So that is where you can focus your efforts on trying to get people to come to your community. So what might bring them to your community? You might ask, do people really want rural? And Gallup poll in 2018 found that for every age group except 18 to 29-year-olds, rural areas were considered a desirable place to live. So at a national level, it appears that yes, people are interested in rural. We have surveyed many communities over the past several years and asked folks what were the reasons that they would want to live in a rural area. And there's a pretty consistent list of what they're looking for. They like the rural environment. They like the natural amenities that are there. Personal safety is always very high on the list. The small town atmosphere and sense of community, the lower cost of living, the lack of regulations. They can keep their truck in the front yard. Excuse me, it's bad allergy day. And one of the ones that surprised me initially, but comes up over and over again, they want quiet. They just want quiet. And that's what they like best about their communities. So I'll spend just a minute talking about cost of living. You're all probably aware of the incredible increase in the cost of housing and the demand for housing nationwide, but also within Illinois. This might be an opportune time to advertise the idea that housing is available and less expensive in your area than it is maybe 15 minutes closer to whatever the biggest city is that you're near. Advertise those houses that are for sale at events that bring people from out of town. This cost of living is one that is very timely as something to market. And the last thing I want to mention is to plan and protect your assets. If that's a natural and rural environment is one of your selling points, then think about ways to ensure that you keep that. And again, this goes back to your comprehensive plan and thinking about what do we have to do to ensure the things that make our community special remain. There we go. So how do you grow your population? Several points here that work well for rural communities. The first is to consider life cycle planning. And what I mean by that is that the residents of your community need to be able to move from one stage of life to another without necessarily having to leave. So it means there needs to be good schools for families with kids. There needs to be a bigger house for them to move up to as they're ready to increase the size of their household. There needs to be some place for older folks whose kids are grown and gone to move down to. And by having this entire life cycle, you allow those houses to, again, recycle through the community. When older folks can move out of that bigger house, then those younger families coming up have some place to go. So life cycle planning, it isn't just housing, it's providing for other needs that come throughout the course of a person's life. The communities that have life cycle planning will be able to hang on to their residents, and they'll be able to attract residents at other stages of life from other communities that haven't planned as well for an entire life cycle. So that's the first thing, consider life cycle planning. The second is placemaking, and this is something where I think rural communities really are outstanding. Nearly every rural community has a great old historic downtown. May not be in great shape right now, but there's something to work with. They have character, they have interest, and they have uniqueness. That's an asset that can't be created. So you've got that going for you right away. Second of all, you've got volunteers. I find that volunteers in rural communities can do just about anything. They can do anything from painting downtown buildings to installing whole new amenities in terms of parks or recreation equipment or whatever. And there's some other ways that we can talk about the community itself helping to create a sense of place. But there's no reason that rural communities shouldn't be outstanding when it comes to placemaking. We've all heard about remote workers over the last year. I know I became a remote worker, and many of you are probably remote workers as well. It remains to be seen how many of us will continue to be remote workers, but it was a trend that started before the pandemic, and it's not going to stop once it's over. It may slow down somewhat from what it's been, but this is something that is going to continue. You've got to meet the remote workers' needs if they're going to be comfortable working from your community. Of course, that means great internet access. It also means housing that has enough space in it for folks to have home offices, so you may need some larger units. And it means places where people can meet up when they don't want to meet at home, co-working space, or even just an attractive coffee shop. There are many ways to meet remote workers' needs, and it's something to keep in mind. The natural environment, we talked about that. You can sell your natural environment. When visitors come, let them know they ought to stay. They ought to become residents. In order to do that, of course, your natural resources have to be accessible, which means they have to be usable in some way. Just having a river is nice to look at, but if you can't use it, you're not going to get visitors. But if you have a boat launch, yeah, you're going to get visitors. And the same goes for lots of other kinds of natural amenities that your community has. So if you want to be able to sell to visitors, make sure there's something for visitors to do when they get there. You can't just have a great view. There has to be some kind of activity that will attract them to come in the first place. Then this is interesting, bringing back former residents. We've all heard rural communities are hemorrhaging their young people, that they're moving to the cities for job opportunities, which is often true. However, that doesn't have to mean that you lose them all. or that you can't get them back. Many communities have gone to scholarship or forgivable loan programs where if there are high school graduates who are going off to college and interested in pursuing a line of work that is needed within the community will provide some financial assistance for that student to complete their education. If they come back and stay a certain amount of time, then that loan is forgiven. If they choose to go elsewhere, then that loan has to be repaid. And this is an interesting way to kind of pick out the jobs that most need filling within your community. Maybe it's teachers, maybe it's a doctor, maybe it's entrepreneurs to start businesses, whatever it is, you can tailor it to your community's needs. The other is recruitment events. And I want to talk about an example from Michigan. There's a program they have called Rethink Western Michigan. West Michigan is largely a rural area, has Grand Rapids is a larger city, but for the most part, they're small communities. And they had that same problem that the younger folks were leaving and they were coming back. They had employers who were saying they didn't have enough workforce. They couldn't attract new employers because they didn't have enough workforce. So what they did was they started this program the evening before Thanksgiving, when lots of grown kids are home visiting their families. They have social events, pizza and beer at a local bar, whatever it may be, where they will have employers present, where they'll have service providers, other people who can help sell the community. And they have had success in having some of the folks who attend these events learn about jobs and opportunities in their West Michigan area that they came from and return. So they move it around different communities every year. And it's an easy thing to try, a low cost event that can reap big rewards. Okay, so we talked about how to grow the population. Let's talk about how to grow business. The first thing is rural already has sometimes an advantage by competing on cost, and you can make that cost even better by keeping taxes down through consolidation. And we'll talk about consolidation a bit more later on, but many times services can be provided for multiple jurisdictions through a single entity. Illinois, as most of you probably know, has more independent jurisdictions than any other state in the union, and there is a move to consider consolidation in many instances. So there's something definitely to look into. Upgrade broadband access, everybody knows about that. And there are programs available to help you do that. And I know you've got several other sessions that are going to focus on that particular topic. Plan for infrastructure improvements. The photo here is new infrastructure going in to serve Ferrara Candy and Facebook, who are moving to DeKalb. These kind of improvements take a long time. You can't wait until you have somebody knocking at the door to then start to figure out how you're going to get them access to the site or how you're going to improve the utilities. This is the kind of thing that takes planning well in advance, lining up potential funding, establishing those contacts, and collaborating with other jurisdictions to finance these improvements. And the last one I wanted to talk about was retaining older workers or attracting new older workers. Just the demographics say that we are going to have a worker shortage, no matter where you are. We need those older workers to stay in the workforce. And in order to do that, it needs to be comfortable for them to continue to work. Work with your employers to ensure that there is a way for older workers to stay in the workforce, whether it's flexible hours or it's going on a contract basis or whatever it may be. Talk with them. Talk with the employers, look at models elsewhere, and try to hang on to those workers as long as you can if there's a workforce shortage in your area. The other thing is to attract new older workers, whether they move to your community or whether they are actually remote but can serve the businesses that might locate in your community. There is one example, a group called WAVE, W-A-H-V-E, workforce. Oh man, I'm going to forget exactly what it stands for, but workforce experts, with lots of experience. I forget exactly what it stands for. Anyway, they have a website, and I'd be happy to send anybody the link that's interested. But what they do is they facilitate connections between older workers who have a lot of expertise, whether it's accounting or legal or insurance or whatever it may be, and employers who can use them. And they make that connection and they handle all the paperwork and payroll and all those sorts of things. And they make it easy to use older workers from your community or older workers from somewhere else who can help employers within your community. And I'm sure there are other innovative ways, thanks to the technology that we now have and are now all much more adept at, to ensure that employers who came to your community would have an adequate workforce. What else can you do? Pursue industry that's well suited to rural locations. Ag tech, technology that is tailored to rural needs. The photo there is Syngenta, which is an R&D seed firm, and they are building this new research facility in Malta, Illinois. Example of technology that is well tailored to a rural location. Why is it well tailored? Well, they can go right out the door and find farmers and plots to test their seeds. So it's advantageous to them to be in the midst of a rural area. Just one example of ag tech. Farm shoring. That is bringing IT functions. Often they went overseas. We've all had those phone calls where you know that you're talking to somebody from far away, and they are bringing them back to rural areas because rural areas are less expensive than urban areas. Facebook coming to DeKalb is an IT function that is farm shoring and is going to a less expensive location. Niche food products, specialty crop processing and value-added products. An example in Illinois, I have heard from farmers that there is demand for poultry processing and specialty grain milling, and that the farmers who work on a smaller scale than the big industrial farms do not have places to process these kinds of products. So an example of the kinds of industry you can bring to your community that might be a good fit. And bioeconomy, the use of ethanol for energy is the best example of that, but there are others. And I would also throw the wind farms and solar farms perhaps under here, in that they're well suited to rural areas. Whether they fit within your comprehensive plan or not is for you to decide. Okay, so you're going to attract new businesses, but it's very important to retain what you have. You can't gain any ground if you lose on one end while you're gaining on the other. Retirements are a fact of life, and many of the owners of businesses in rural communities, and actually anywhere in the country, are approaching retirement age. It's important to get out in front of this. Talk to your business owners, perhaps survey them, find out several years in advance who might be considering retirement. One action that you can take if somebody is considering retirement is to suggest that they get involved with mentoring someone who could take over their business, someone who might be able to purchase it under favorable terms, who can come in and work with them during those last few years that they're running the business, really learn it and make a smooth transition so that when there's new ownership in place, you don't end up losing the business. You end up having it continue to serve your community. Community support enterprise, not easy, but doable. This is when the community itself raises funds, often to keep a business open that they feel is essential, sometimes to start a new business. Grocery stores are a good example. Community finds out they're going to lose their grocery store, and they band together to try to keep that open. The community residents can purchase shares in the business, and in return, they will get something, whether it's financial return or whether it's discount at the business or whatever it may be. But the community has a stake in that business, and this has been successfully done in many locations. Employee ownership. This is another way to keep a business that may otherwise disappear from your community. There are a couple of things that the banks can do to help you out. First is the Main Street Employee Ownership Act, relatively recent from 2018, which encourages banks to support local stock purchases by employees so that they become owners of the business. And then the Community Reinvestment Act can also be used to help employees take over ownership of local businesses. So relationships, going back to that early slide about establishing relationships well in advance, establish relationships with your banks because they may come along and help you. Market your businesses. There's lots of ways to market businesses. The one that I would talk about for a minute is social media. So many rural communities, the businesses are using social media, but very often it's at a amateur kind of level. It's worth it to get that investment in professional social media, a website that really works well, a website that enables purchasing, not just looking at where it's located and some photos, and somebody that's going to maintain it. And this is a good place for several businesses perhaps collaborate and have some staff that watches for all of them on their social media and keeps track of it. The last thing I want to mention is there's a lot of technical assistance available out there for your local businesses, and that can make a lot of difference. Your universities, whatever university you happen to be close to. NIU has several technical assistance programs that are either free or low in cost for local businesses that are heavily subscribed, but worth pursuing. U of I Extension, a perfect example, technical assistance that's available to you. Community colleges generally will have some technical assistance. Then there's SBDC offices. SCORE has been great. I've worked with communities that have done very well with mentoring from SCORE, retired executives. So there's a lot of technical assistance out there. Very often your businesses don't know where it is, or they're busy. And boy, if you can step in and help them make that connection, it makes a big difference. Let's talk about regionalism for a moment. Regionalism is something that has gotten quite a bit of attention lately, and it's really, I think, one of the very promising trends that rural communities can follow, in that not every community can be everything. Not every community is going to be able to be an employment center and a great place to live and a tourist attraction. And very often, because every community wants to be everything, they end up competing with other communities. Let's all do it all, and we all want to get that business. A regional approach makes a lot of sense. Perhaps the industry or the jobs are going to be in the biggest town that is half an hour away, but those folks are going to need some place to live, and your community can be one of the premier places in which to live. Or perhaps your community is the one that people who work in the greater region head to on a weekend in order to have some recreational activities, or to have dinner on Saturday night, or whatever it is. But regionalism allows the different communities to play different roles and everybody to succeed, and to realize that growth in one community is really growth in all of them because of the way that they interact. In addition, often supporting industries to whatever the major industry in the region is, can locate in less expensive locations that are a little bit further away. Once again, focusing on that regional economy enables you to realize what opportunities there might be for your community to actually attract industry. So regionalism, I think, has a lot of promise. These are some ideas here. Many of them came from an article. It was in the State and Local Government Review, where they published a study that they had done regarding regionalism. And they talked about what they did was they surveyed experts around the country regarding what role regionalism could play in local economic development. And these are the things that people felt were most important. The regional entity, whether it's a county or a nonprofit organization of some way, or some sort, or whatever it happens to be, can be an intermediary for you. They can connect you to the urban areas and establish those relationships and manage those relationships. It's something that rural communities don't have staff or time to do, and the regional entity can help you very much on that score. The regional entity is a place to develop a vision of what everybody wants that region to become. That may be a SEDS plan that gets done, or it may not be, but they have the resources to put into that kind of a research effort and to guide the entire region, paying attention to each of the communities within the region that, again, is tough for a rural community to do on its own. The third thing is that often the urban areas do not appreciate the contributions that the rural area is making to the regional economy. It's tough to monetize these sometimes, but I'm going to use housing as an example once again. If a booming small city is finding that the cost of housing is skyrocketing, as it is right now in many places, the presence of nearby rural communities that have quality housing at a lower price point means that businesses can attract employees. So just one example of the contribution that rural locations can make to the regional economy. The regional entity is a way to attract technology you all can use to think through consolidation and modernization efforts. That being said, you must always balance economies of scale with retaining identity. We have worked in multiple communities where they were doing pretty well until, and I'm going to use one example, and I'm not saying this isn't a good thing because there's plus side to it, but they said they were doing well until they lost their elementary school because of school district consolidation. And then the population of young families just dwindled. This is an instance where you have to think about that balance between retaining the identity of the community by having something like a school and the cost savings and the strength of the educational program that can be offered by consolidating into a larger school district. Just one example of that. So here's my contact information, and I would be happy to share links to any of the examples or provide you with quite a bit of other information if you want to contact me. But Jolene Willis is going to take over now and talk about some of the great programs that DeKalb County has been involved in over the last few years. Jolene?
Before you get started, let me just jump in and remind everyone that this session is being recorded and the materials will be available for anyone who is registered at some point within the next couple of days after the conclusion of the presentation. Thanks. Jolene, you can take it away.
Things are. Okay. Just want to give that little introduction there for anybody to drink. My name is Jolene Willis. I'm the Economic Development Coordinator for DeKalb County Government. We're very blessed here in DeKalb County that we also have a public-private partnership that Mim was referring to. A lot of the successes they've had here recently, a separate entity that the county contributes to other public-private funders. So you'll get a lot of acronyms and DeKalb County this or that today, but it's really a wonderful area to live in and work with so many great organizations that are dedicated to moving DeKalb County forward. Just to start here, like I mentioned, I am housed with DeKalb.
Jolene, let me interrupt just a second. We seem to be having a little bit of audio difficulty with you. Maybe you'd want to turn off your camera and that might improve the audio quality.
Works for me.
Thanks.
I am housed in DeKalb County Government in the Community Development Department. If you're not familiar, DeKalb County is located in Chicago in central Illinois. Our county population is about 105,000 people. We'll see how this current census shakes out going forward. We have 14 incorporated communities throughout the county. DeKalb County, or DeKalb Sycamore is next at about 18,000. And then we're blessed with a lot of really great small communities with a population of anywhere from about 1,000 to 2,000. We have about 6 or 7 that have that great nucleus there.
As I mentioned, I'm in the Community Development Department, which is the traditional planning and land use and building permit and zoning department for the county. We also oversee the Dekalb County Regional Planning Commission, which is a one county regional planning commission made up of all of our communities as representatives and discuss a broad range of topics. And we meet about 6-7 times a year and talk about planning issues, everything from annexations and zoning to, just all the nuts and bolts there of planning. So that's a great resource share opportunity too. And to lay more framework here, in about 2015, 2016, several forged the path for the comprehensive economic development strategy, the federal economic development planning document many of you are familiar with, and we did it uniquely and on our own with the help of those entities. There was the county government and Northern Illinois University helped us formulate a plan, and that is available on EDC's website there. So moving from that project of going through the whole SEDS process, we had countywide involvement. There were 5 goals established out of that planning process. We went simultaneously then with the Dekalb County Community Foundation, another huge supporter here in Dekalb County. If you don't have a community foundation, I highly recommend you one because they just really are the backbone of so many great projects and initiatives of all kinds in the county. And I know Terry Sparks with the Dekalb County Community Foundation is on the call today, so she can sure join here anytime. But if I don't do them enough justice, but they had a program start up about the same time all of the countywide economic strategic planning was happening, and it was their community economic development grants program. So the foundation set aside about $300,000 dedicated to the communities and the county here to do planning and projects, and that just really was a tremendous gift for their foresight in seeing what was happening in the county with the economic development planning, and then what can they do to empower communities to take that a step forward. And you all know, whether your community's 40,000 or 3,000 or 300, getting people to get excited about planning and coming to meetings and doing the surveys and all that, takes a lot of cheerleading. So the Community Foundation for us, was a tremendous incentive, and I know that's not available to all out there, but I think want to share our story and what we were involved in, and perhaps you can have some of the same outcomes and takeaway programs that we came up with that were unique for us. But the Community Foundation, we kind of went on a road show to all the communities and explained the program to them. I, as staff support with the county, offered to help any of the communities write the grant application, because as we all know, a lot of small communities don't have that extra staff to help with that end of it. So we got all the logistics taken care of, and to date there's been over, since that 2016 launch, there's been over $270,000 awarded to the communities for their implementation, for their planning, which they had to complete first, or show that they had a recent plan, a community plan, and then the rest of their funding could be earmarked toward a project that came out of their planning. So it was a great process, a great carrot and stick to get the communities to, do their homework, and then they get to do the fun stuff at the end. So they had 20,000 earmarked for each community and for the county. And so each of the communities, either they could use their own consultant, or if they had their recent comprehensive plan or another plan, they could use that as well. And NIU Center for Governmental Studies, Mim and her colleagues were involved in a lot of these projects, and really mastered being able to boil down a small comprehensive planning document and exercise that was palatable for small communities to interact with. So once those were taken in and done throughout the county, and like I mentioned, there's about 30,000 left out of the pool of funds that the Community Foundation set aside. So they are working towards getting the rest of it distributed to the 3 communities that have their project. So that's just a page out of the Community Foundation's report, annual report. And you can view that on their website as well, and look at all the great projects going on around the county. This is a snapshot of what happened out of Hinckley, which is a community on Route 30, kind of in the central part of the county, of about 2,000 people, but they've got an ongoing mural project, a new website and signs, and just trying to take care of a lot of those low-hanging fruit projects and get more momentum moving forward for them. So other things that came out of it, I'm especially proud of the top right photo there. That's the Village of Lee, a population of about 350 people. They probably had 30 to 40 people at most of their initial planning meetings, and which is saying something for communities if you're working with them of that size. So, this goes to show you can't discount the smallest community in your county, and people are willing to step up and share ideas and work on projects. They want to see their community survive. So as I mentioned, we had a perfect storm of the countywide high-level economic development planning going on with the CEDS program. We had momentum from that, then coupled with the DeKalb County Community Foundation's Community Economic Development Grant Program, the $20,000 earmarked for each community and the county to do planning in small projects, and the money was there. So we always know that if you work in economic development longer and working with small communities, there's not money usually to back up a lot of the great programs and ideas. But some of that key outcome that came through for us was out of one of the CEDS programs was developing a mayor's forum. We didn't have an organized opportunity to get all of the mayors and village presidents in the county together to talk about issues, or in late 2019, and was going along pretty good. We'd meet about every other month for breakfast early morning, and then COVID hit and we went to Zoom and conference calls. That framework had been established, and so that was almost a bi-weekly call there through summer of 2020, getting communities to strategize on small business assistance through the COVID pandemic, and how best to communicate with the governor's office and the health department. And so there was a lot of key moving laid with the mayor's forum, and then it was really solidified with the issues with COVID. And now we've had mayoral elections, and we have 9 new mayors out of our 14 in the county. So we're getting going with our new group again here, and looking forward to keeping that program going. Another key program that came out of that was our GIS Community Infrastructure Program. Our county administrator at the time, Gary Hansen, had led the charge on that, but saw the need for communities that don't have the full-time GIS staff and software, which is expensive to maintain. The county has that already. We can work out a program, a value-added program coupled in technology to these communities. So we have about 90% participation in that. Some of our larger communities that already have GIS haven't participated yet, but we're hopeful that they'll engage with us there. But it's a way for these small communities that have paid for it, their community engineers, city engineers, to have all of this, drawing and everything of all their, wastewater infrastructure and water mains and, light poles and all that kind of thing, and have it archived in our county system. They get a private email editing or administrator function that they can access it there in their village, and they can use a GIS component to mark locations and upload that data. So it's really interactive amongst the communities as much as they want it to be. There's a tiered level of service, and it's really been a great asset that we know this information will be archived and housed and continue living instead of just on a dusty shelf someplace in a corner. So that's another great program we've had there. Regional utility provider up here, and they helped us orchestrate a economic development boot camp, kind of a site selector 101 to educate elected officials on all communities required to have available for documentation for consideration. So that involved DC EDC, again, our economic development, public-private partnership leadership, county, and all communities.
We appear to have lost Jolene. Give her a second to try and reconnect. Technical difficulty.
Okay,
There we go. All right, Jolene, you're back.
Do you have me? Okay, sorry about that. About to wrap up here anyway, but we've had a lot of great programs come out of Community Champions. Was another group that formed countywide, and we've had participation from a lot of the community cheerleaders, not necessarily elected officials. Some are, but you know those people in your community that have taken on this project or that project and make things happen in your community. So there's been a lot of great involvement countywide, and it's a concentrated effort. It's really a lot of reaching out, making sure, do we have somebody from the north end of the county, the south end of the county, communities represented. So there's a lot of countywide organizations making sure we have people at the table, and because otherwise, as you know, there's always the ones that always show up, and so there's a effort to really make sure meetings are moved around the county. It's just not always held in Dekalb or Sycamore. So we are very conscious of that. Another neat program that came out of Community Champions, kind of a sub, was this tourism app. You can access it from the Google Play Store or anywhere, called Out and About Dekalb County, Illinois, and it's sponsored by the Dekalb County History Center. And, a mobile tourism guide for all the attractions and restaurants and such throughout the county. They're selling ad space on it to, try to engage visitors, so that if someone's in the area, they can access it through the Convention Visitors Bureau is a major sponsor in it. The Dekalb County Community Foundation, again, was very involved. And so all of these great countywide entities are really making an effort to how can we attract visitors, showcase the amenities that we have in the communities and throughout the county, and try to unique ways to reach all ages. But those people that are looking for those experiences, if they're coming out to Shabbat Lake, or if they're coming to an event at DeKalb, what else could they fill their time with during a visit to NIU? They could do a little day trip around the county and check out some of the neat sites. So those are some of the very high level programs we've worked on here, and they've been very exciting to see come to fruition. And just like anything, it's a lot of work and there's a lot of people carrying a lot of weight here with these, but as you do identify those countywide partners that and keep them close to you, and figure out ways to work together, because the Community Foundation, the county, the DeKalb County Economic Development Corporation, NIU, they're all just major players here, and we've got to keep working together to keep moving the county forward and our communities. We don't just want to represent a donut. We want to have everyone in the county at the table, because there are a lot of great opportunities happening here, and we're seeing some of that ripple effect with some dormant housing subdivisions being restarted in this area. We're just a half hour from the edge of Aurora and St. Charles and Naperville and all of that, so there's a lot of tremendous opportunity for growth for communities, as Mim mentioned, looking for the quiet, the rural, the less cost of living from more of the suburban area. So I think that's all I've got here in a nutshell. Looking forward to any feedback or questions, and we'll just put up my contact information. Was my last slide, if my computer hasn't froze up here, and you can reach me that way as well.
Jolene, we can't see your screen's not shared, so we can't see your slides anymore.
Okay.
So with that, perhaps we can address some of the questions that have been posted in the chat.
Yeah, there were some comments about, Jolene, we'll just come back to you since you just started. There were some comments and questions about the DeKalb County Community Foundation, where that came from, ongoing funding to support it. And then there were also some responses from other folks that are familiar, but I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about that, because there seemed to be some interest.
Sure. Yeah, everyone needs a DeKalb County Community Foundation, and we're sure to have one. But I would think, don't let not having a community foundation, stop you in your planning. But look for those resources, look for those major community stakeholders to invest. I've lived in those smaller rural areas as well too, where money's tight, and you can still find funds for a worthy cause. But the DeKalb County Community Foundation, their website is dekalbccf.org, and you can Google them and find them as well. And if Terry here wants to chime in, she sure can. But each community foundation is different. They all have different goals and objectives. So we're just very fortunate that our community foundation is a separate, not part of the county too. I want to make that clear. It's a separate standalone nonprofit entity, but that their board and leadership identified community and economic development as a key component of education and just all kinds of great programs, so social services and things. So it's not just that's all they do. But the Community and Economic Development Grant Program was a one-time program. They, we're hoping to get communities to have updated projects and see them implemented. They also have other programs that communities can tap for park improvements and other things throughout their process. So there's to say there's not funding, there's not going to be another round of funding of this type for this type of program, but I think there will be what other ways to fund special projects from them too. But we're very you can find partners for good projects.
Jolene, this is Terry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Terry Sparks from the Dekalb County Community Foundation. And I can chime in on that too, because without partners like NIU Center for Governmental Studies to assist our communities in their planning and prep work to get their plans together, as well as the county and Jolene's role in helping provide grant writing support to our communities, this project may not be successful. This grant program may not be successful. So a lot of that, as they were saying, depends on the great partnerships that we have throughout other organizations and entities throughout the county. And I know all of you on this call have those networks and have those relationships in place. So yeah, don't let not having a community foundation deter you from moving your work forward. We were happy to play a part, but we're just one part of many that make this work. So we're just fortunate to be a part of it. And one thing that we have learned from this program that I'll share is that, we had set this grant program to be about a 3-year period. Well, we're going into year 5, 6 because community readiness looks different in all communities. And so whether that's leadership, kind of like, what are we going to do, or how do we do this? Or just the readiness of the community for change really does make a difference in the timetable on how projects are implemented and how plans are formed. So we've learned that lesson through this process as well. And there is a great network of community foundations throughout the state of Illinois and all throughout the country. But it might be worth digging into if you don't know if you have one, or one that serves your area, not just your community. Please do a little bit of research and see what you can find. I wish I had a site that I could drive you to immediately, but I don't. So if anybody on this call does, please throw it in the chat. But yeah, we were just thrilled to be a part of this and helping economic development move forward in our county. So thank you to Mim and Jolene and their teams and their partnerships as well.
Thank you for those responses, Jolene and Terry. I'm going to break here just for a moment. We are scheduled to go until 1 o'clock. I think that Mim and Jolene are willing to stay on later, but I know some folks will have to drop off when the lunch hour is over. So Mike, could you go ahead and put that poll question up so that we can get responses? So we'll continue with questions for anyone that wants to stay on, but if you don't mind, if you'd answer that poll question before you drop off, that's helpful for extension. So here's a question. Are there some good examples in Illinois of regional local development organizations where rural communities have worked together? I don't know if either of you have any ideas.
Well, the regional planning commissions are, I saw a comment there in the chat earlier about that, but there are usually a regional planning commission around that engages, the elected officials or, appointees from planning commissions throughout the area. Would be a place to start. We're a little unique that we're a single county, but we do that outreach throughout our area and are involved in some other regional planning commissions outside of DeKalb County as well. But there's that, and also your economic development corporations and such usually are involved in some type of regional efforts as well.
An example of a regional commission that's not based on counties is the Black Hawk Hills Regional Planning Commission, which is 6 counties in the northwest part of the state. I know we have a few people from that area on the call today, and they provide some staff that the individual counties might not be able to have on their own, and they also have that big picture view. I know there was a question a little further down about examples of how do you get these communities to work together, and I wanted to address that for a minute, because whether you have a regional commission or not, it's very possible to do that. In Dekalb County, we had some luck with addressing common elements that was obvious that multiple communities had a stake in. Much of that was transportation related, all along a certain highway, or all having desires for access to their part of the county to be improved. So once they realized that, there's an incentive to work together. It's also happened around recreational resources like rivers that flow through multiple communities. So that's where an easy way to get multiple communities successfully to work together. Another tactic is, and this is one where the regional commission can be quite helpful, is to raise grant money that is only available for at the regional level and involves multiple communities participating. For example, we're doing some work out in Black Hawk Hills now to improve the agricultural economy. And there are representatives from around the county, and it's a project that will benefit everybody, because it's a piece of the economy that extends beyond community boundaries, beyond county boundaries. So if you look for those kinds of opportunities, you can bring people together through the regional commission, or perhaps even without them.
Thank you. And Richard Funderburg did include a link in the chat box in case anyone's interested. And it's a link of the Regional Planning Commission's multi-county, that include multi-county and small counties. So in case anyone's interested in looking at that. Another question, what were some of the incentives that were effective in helping people see beyond local objectives to work together as a region? And what were some pitfalls that you noticed?
And incentive, yeah, go ahead, Jolene.
For us, it was the Community Foundation's grant program.
Right.
The new one with the $20,000 for your community, you just have to apply for it. It is a pretty good incentive. So that was a great way to get your foot in the door and tell them they need to do some planning so they can pay for some projects. And so that was really, can't sugarcoat it at all, but that was really a great way to get their attention. But all of the countywide planning that was going on, the Mayor's Forum too is another great way to reinforce different programs that are happening around the county through the Regional Planning Commission or DCEDC and other events that, getting to the mayors collectively and telling them this is something you need to really pay attention to. That was another way we launched our GIS program, and they saw the value in it. They had to sign off on it to be part of it. So that was another great way to reinforce that, countywide networking.
I'd like to add to that in small communities in particular, the impact of personalities cannot be exaggerated. I can think of a particular example where two communities that definitely had a lot to gain by working together refused to for years because of personal animosities that went back to issues from long ago, and those folks were still around, and they just weren't going to talk to each other, and they were still in leadership positions in the community. So we did eventually overcome that issue, but people are everything in small communities. All of you who work in rural communities know that strong leaders make things happen, and animosity between leaders keeps things from happening. So there's definitely a pitfall to watch out for.
Thank you so much, Mem and Jolene. We appreciate your time today and for presenting. Thanks to our participants and for their engagement. Again, if you register for the webinar, you'll get an email in the next few days with a link to the recording as well as PowerPoint slides. If you did not register for the webinar, please make sure you include your email in the chat box so you can be added to get that email. the local government education series with Extension happens on a regular basis, and the webinars we're having with Extension and Rural Partners are a few times a month. So thank you all again for your participation. Mike, do you have anything else before we wrap it up?
I think that covers it all. Thank you so much to everyone for your participation. And Laura, thank you for being such a pillar of this series.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Enjoy the weather.